Hello and welcome to a Microprose Formula 1 Grand Prix for the Amiga. Quite possibly the most extensive and as accurate as could be, I suppose, Formula 1 experience available on the Amiga. Made by Jeff Crummond, also known for games like Stunt Car Racer, and if you are very old school like me, Revs on the 8-bits. And released through Microprose, which of course was known for the simulations mainly. You can possibly imagine even what type of game this is. The manual states it's a simulation as well. The box states it's a simulation, so that should be an indication, I suppose. Unlike many other games before this and quite possibly after, this tried to encapsulate as much of the Formula One experience as possible. Something like a full season in the case of this game, the 1991 season, meant a full season. A lot of Formula One inspired games would have 3, 5, 6, 10, maybe not 10, but 5, 6, and whatever different races in a season. In this game, it is all 16 tracks of the Formula One season of 1991. Something that is being put on display in the video right now that made this game really stand out was the option to, if you look at a race distance, it defaults to 10%, but you can set that to 100%. And 100% means 100%, or by the definition as of 1991 at least, 200 miles or 2 hours, whatever comes first. Depending on the track you're racing, a full 100% race can be, I think, high 40s to the high 70s. I can't remember the 100% race distance for every single track because it's been years since I played this game. 100% race distance, because we're talking an hour 40, an hour 50 for a full race. So it's just taking the time out to do that kind of stuff. It's a bit impractical at times. For the purpose of the gameplay showcase, I'm going to be using the Phoenix track, which is the first track in the season. And I don't think the manual is overly generous towards this track in its evaluation of it. But personally, I find Phoenix to be a good first race of the season because it exposes you to a lot of the challenges you'll be facing as a Formula One racer without necessarily going overboard with any of them. We are doing a qualifying session, which means one warm-up lap, one timed lap, and then returning to pit. And for the first part of this video, I will be using Amiga 500 just to showcase that it was actually meant to be played on the Amiga 500. I personally think that was asking too much of the 500, but you can judge for yourself. Yeah, we are talking frames per minute, not frames per second. In high graphics areas, this is not overly impressive, but there's only so much you can squeeze out of 7 megahertz, I suppose. There's an option to lower the detail settings, which I will be doing once we pass the start-finishing line, which will increase the frame rate quite dramatically, actually. In a test recording before settling for this recording, I actually got thrown completely off by the sudden gain in the frames, but you will have to wait till we pass the start-finishing line and see that yourself. The game contains 5 different difficulty settings, ranging I was about to say ranging from novice to ace. And if you look in the middle of the steering wheel unit, you can see there are 6 boxes even. The 2 leftmost ones are blocked out, and that is because we are playing on semi-pro. Those are your help setup options. The leftmost one, automatic braking, which causes the computer to try and slow down the car before entering curves, bends, turns, whatever applies. And that is a setting I absolutely hate, because the computer seems to be a bit too cautious in its braking. And of course, when you are racing, any kind of racing, but specifically Formula 1, you want to brake as late as possible, and not having that control yourself is something I would not apply. The next one, which you can't see either, is automatic gears, and similar to the automatic brakes, I don't like the computer's ideas of when I'm supposed to be changing gears compared to my ideas of when I'm supposed to be changing gears. So I would automatically disable those as well, or that as well, I should say. So immediately right of that one, the arrow pointing upwards is self-rightening spins. If you spin off the track, the computer will turn to face the car in such a way that you can rejoin the race. The next one, the diamond-shaped box, is indestructible, and you can possibly imagine what that will do. Then the next one, to the right of that, again, you can see the line in the middle of the track. That is the dotted best line, which is basically the ideal racing line. The manual does say that to draw benefit from that, you have to have that line in the middle of your car at all times. For me, the reason to apply it was the fact that I haven't played this game for a long time, and I didn't want to look like a complete amateur, more so than I normally do when playing this game, so I'm using the best line as a reference. The last and final help option is suggested gear. If you look at furthest to the right, you can see 2 gear indicators. The red number is our current gear, and the blue one is the suggested gear, and that will suggest the gear you should be in for the next curve. Sort of. It's not actually entirely true. If you are to enter, let's say, a chicane, which is basically a large S-bend or a horseshoe kind of whatever, you know what I mean. The suggested gear will suggest the gear for the last curve. It will not change for the individual curve, meaning that you can bump into a chicane where entering it in 4th gear is perfectly safe, but exiting it has to be done in 2nd. The suggested gear will suggest 2nd gear for the entire chicane. Before going any further, I'm going to be switching to something with a bit more power than the humble Amiga 500 and do a full 10% raise of Phoenix. I've got a decent qualifying time, so I'm in pole position, just to have some gameplay running in the background while I continue to talk about the game. It is worth being aware of that shortcoming of the suggested gear, and if you have on certain tracks you have a lot of gears in short succession, a lot of turns in short succession, it can be very inaccurate. But it's nice to have as a reference point when you're hammering down a 6th gear straight and there's no distance warning. Some curves have distance markers before them and others haven't, and then suddenly you see the suggested gear lighting up, and it's probably an indication that you should at least be aware of the fact that there's something coming up that you need to pay attention to. At the lowest difficulty setting, this game is basically impossible not to win, as long as of course you know the tracks somewhat decently. The computer opponents will not offer much of a challenge, and with all the help options, the car is virtually driving itself, sort of. It is still a simulation though, so you still have to pay somewhat attention, and even though automatic brakes will brake for curves, will not brake for other obstacles, cars and things like that, so you can still get entangled into other vehicles. At the highest difficulty setting, which is Ace, good luck with that. The computer is driving extremely aggressively and extremely fast with the different tracks. Something that I'm not showcasing in this video is your ability to change the car settings. You can change the front and rear wing, the brake balance, gear ratios, and what type of tires you'll be using for the race. This is only something that is relevant when you start doing longer races than 10% races. But on Ace difficulty level, because of course all the help options are disabled, you basically need to know every single track, every single bend, and the speed for every single curve. And on top of that, the car will have a default setup which is perfectly serviceable at lower difficulty settings for most tracks. But even at this setting, semi-pro, certain tracks, if you leave it at the default setting, you will be eating dust. You cannot compete with the computer cars. So you will need to start tampering with the settings, and as I said, not super relevant for the lower difficulty levels, but as you increase the difficulty level, it becomes more and more required, mandatory, outright. I should mention, by the way, that there's a pseudo multiplayer option in this game. Something like a split screen I don't think was even considered, because if you were to play on a humble Amiga 500, you can imagine what this would look like if there was two screens running at the same time. Your computer will probably not survive the experience. So the way a multiplayer, which is a bit generous because it allows for 1 or 2 players, but I suppose 2 is a multiple, so it is a multiplayer. But the way it's handled is that you can define how many turns each player get during a race, and I'm fairly sure if you set a wonky amount of turns for a short race, the computer will override this setting and come up with something more reasonable. But the first player will play for a certain amount of time, lap, whatever, and then they will get a warning that the computer is going to take control of their car. The camera will then change to the other player, and that player will get a warning that they will gain control of their car. And that way the computer will switch back and forth between each player until the race is completed. It's a decent way to handle it, but it's not fully elegant, and that is because of irrelevant of difficulty setting. The computer, unlike in many other games, is not driving perfectly. The computer will attempt some questionable overtakings at times. It will enter curves, turns, bends at too high a speed at times and spin out. And of course, because your car is being controlled by the computer, you can risk losing your car while unable to do anything about it and not being responsible for it. And it doesn't have to be that the computer algorithm controlling your car is doing anything wonky. It could be any of the other computer controlled cars doing something wonky, causing your controlled car to crash out. It is a trade-off that has to be tolerated. As I said, not necessarily the most elegant way of handling it, but it's probably better than expecting an Amiga 500 to survive two versions of this racing running at the same time. From a simulation aspect, most of the simulation aspects only will kick in at longer distance races, something like tire wear. In the setup, you can set what tire compound you start races with, and you have the choice between A, B, C, and D compound tires. D compound tires has got a lot of grip, but they are wearing out relatively quickly. A compound tires are very hard wearing, but they got virtually no grip in comparison. So the decision you have to make is to whether you are gambling on low grip early on in the race for more durable tires, or tolerate the fact that you have to change tires multiple times during a race by having the more grip at all times. Because the wear and tear of the tires is definitely a present factor. In a lot of racing games, if the tires is even a factor, your tires are either perfectly okay or they are not perfectly okay. Whereas in this game, the tire wear is happening gradually, and it is affected by how aggressively you drive. If you bump into the cars, it's going to affect your tires as well. And you will notice it by, let's say, a fifth gear curve that you can easily do in the suggested fifth gear. Suddenly, you find that it becomes a struggle to do in even third gear. That's usually an indication that it's time for a tire change, because you get to a point where the car just becomes unresponsive, and trying to stay competitive is virtually impossible. Personally, when doing 100% races, I play with a E compound, which requires at least one tire change during a full race, but I know that for the first, perhaps third of the race, I will have limited grip, but then of course as the tires get worn, the grip will increase onto the point where you need to get them changed, and yeah. But it is how the pit strategy is in this game. Refueling is not a consideration you have to worry about. It of course is a major factor in real Formula 1 because the weight of petrol and or the fuel they're using, it's not petrol, it's a much stronger fuel type. But it is a consideration for how much fuel to carry for the weight, and because of course a heavier car is slower, all that stuff. Not a factor in this game. What is a factor is the concept of slipstreaming. Because of course you are driving, you have a wind resistance against your car. And when you get very close to another car, or right behind another car basically, you get into a mini vacuum sort of thing, where the car is absorbing all the wind factor, giving you a burst to your engine power, which you can use to overtake. Of course, as soon as you move out behind the other car, then your car is exposed to the wind resistance yet again, but that burst of power is usually adequate for you to do an overtaking. In conclusion, when it comes to Formula 1 racing, this is probably the best that was ever made for the Amiga, especially from a simulation point of view. It's still extremely playable to this day, though newer modern games on more modern systems will probably be more enjoyable. But not bad at all. even to this day. So on that note, I will say thanks for watching, take care, see you next time. Bye bye for now.